That will be great.
Oh yes, sorry. I stole it.
No worries. Great. So while I get my slide changer and I begin the presentation, sharing with you the examples that we've implemented at L'Oreal. Thank you. Well, so a very good morning to all of you. I'm going to interestingly start with the conclusions, okay? So we are actually on slide number 1, and you would be wondering as to why am I starting with conclusions, okay? Now, so my first conclusion is an outcome of all the AI projects that we have implemented at L'Oreal over the last 3 years. And outcome number 1 is experience. So today, at least, we can say that with the AI projects that we've implemented at L'Oreal, we've been able to deliver stellar experience not only to our candidates, but also to our employees. And since we're talking about talent acquisition, I would focus on hiring managers, on recruiters, and HR generalists who play an active role in the recruitment process. I will share the quantitative element when it comes to these outcomes a little later during the presentation as to why we say that these AI projects have helped us really deliver a great experience to our people. Parasite task. Now, this is my favorite term. Now, what I mean by that is, with these AI projects that we've implemented, we've been able to reduce the time spent on non-value added tasks significantly so that recruiters could then reallocate that time on more value-added activities of the recruitment process. More to come later. The third one is enabler. So when we started implementing AI projects within the recruitment function at L'Oreal globally, many people, the first question that they had for me was, is this going to replace the human recruiter? Is this going to ensure that the human touch will be invisible slowly? And my answer now, after 3 years of implementing these projects globally at L'Oreal, is a big no. Because what I have seen is over the last 3 years, these technologies have only helped human recruiters take more sound hiring decisions and have acted as an enabler. Again, more to come later. And last but not the least, the outcome number 4, I would say, is customization. Now, of course, when we talk about customization or personalization, what comes to our mind first is, okay, sharing the communication with candidate which is meant for the candidate instead of a global message. Of course, that's what we've also achieved. But more importantly, when it comes to these AI projects, we've not taken something which is off the shelf and implemented or just plugged it into our system and then it works from day one. What we've done with these AI solutions is we took them, we adapted them for what L'Oreal is all about. So these solutions are 100% made by L'Oreal for L'Oreal. So it's extremely relevant from a cultural perspective, from the way we operate as a company. So today I'm going to share with you 2 concrete examples of how we implemented artificial intelligence and projects like machine learning or algorithms in our talent acquisition function. But before I do that, I think it's important for me to share the context as to what actually made us implement these solutions in our recruitment function. What was the thought process that was there, and what were we thinking when these projects were being designed and being developed? So, every year, 2 million candidates apply online to different jobs at L'Oreal. That's the number of CVs, unique CVs that L'Oreal receives every year. Of this 2 million CVs that we receive every year, we recruit 5,000 people. Now, these 5,000 people that we recruit from these unique 2 million CVs, this job is done by a recruitment organization comprising of 145 recruiters globally. So that's the size of the talent acquisition function at L'Oreal. This is what we recruit from the number of CVs that we receive. Now, clearly, the challenge that stands out here is that of a huge volume of CVs, the huge volume of applications, number 1. How do we ensure that all those 2 million candidates who apply to different jobs at L'Oreal, at least hear back from us, get some feedback from us. They're not forgotten, or it's not like I have applied now, it's apply and pray, or it's like getting into a black hole kind of a situation. So while this challenge was there as to how do we ensure that candidate experience is not impacted, on the other hand, we were also asking ourselves that how do we deliver great candidate experience, at the same time reduce the turnaround time to serve the business, to fill positions faster, at the same time to ensure that we don't miss critical talent and are quick to the market when it comes to recruitment. So with these two big challenges, we started this journey of implementing AI within the recruitment process. At the same time, we realized that there was a big need that was felt in the way we were approaching this function. So there was a big transition that we as an organization had to do. And what I'm going to show you now is something that we realized 3 years ago, but this is something which I assume is the story with all of us in the room. The way we are structured, the way we structure our functions or our organizations or the HR function per se, so far the approach has been like this. We focus a lot on process, then we think of tools that will help us deliver those process, and lastly comes the experience. Now this is pretty much how it was. Now we started from this point, and now we've transitioned to a very different circle where process is not the first step. We're talking about experience being the first thing that we want to think about, being more experience-centric, talking about experience as to what experience should we provide to our employees, what experience should we provide to our candidates, to our recruiters. To deliver that experience, what kind of process do we need to have in place? And for that process to really be successful, what kind of technology do we need to put behind? So that's the thinking that we have transitioned in the last 3 years from the first circle to the second circle. I'm going to show you now a typical... Oh, is it? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to share with you a typical recruitment funnel. Of course, all of us know that. Now, where did we see opportunities in improving the way we were doing recruitment at L'Oreal? So, of course, all these projects that I'm going to share with you from next slide onwards, these projects have been implemented in the first 2 steps of the recruitment process, the application stage and the screening stage. And the reason being that when we have a huge volume of applications coming our way, how do we really manage experience in the application step? How do we make the application process seamless? Why should candidates search for jobs? Why can't the machine recommend jobs depending on the past search behaviors? Why should candidates search for employer branding content? Why can't the machines recommend employer branding content to the candidate instead of the search behavior? And when the candidate goes through the application process, how easy or difficult do we make it for the candidate about the company culture, or convince me more about why I should take this role and not any other role. So she has been programmed to ask and answer questions. Now, how does this work? This is actually replacing the CV screening or the phone screening that recruiters were doing manually today. So let's say if Mahesh was to apply for a job, the recruiter would look at his CV, would spend, say, 5 minutes qualifying the CV if the CV meets the job requirements or not, then perhaps would spend 15 minutes more to schedule interview, reschedule interview, and all of that, and then would spend, say, another 30 minutes to do a phone screening. So all in all, the recruiter would spend 45 minutes doing the entire process. Now, this thing has been concised and is now handled by Maya directly for us. So this is a conversation that I was having with Maya. So if you see me on my mobile phone, be rest assured that I'm talking to Maya, because that's my latest hobby these days, to talk to her more and more. So how does this thing work? So when Maya is asking all these questions, she would take these answers and put them back in the applicant tracking system. Now, the recruiter, say I'm the recruiter, I go to my applicant tracking system, type for Mahesh, type the name Mahesh, and his profile comes up. And this is where I can search where this candidate, is he okay with the work location? Is he okay with the salary ranges that we've offered? Does he have the work permit to work in one of our countries? And depending on the tagging that she does on the candidate profile in the applicant tracking system, it's the recruiter who then decides whether they want to take the candidate further in the process or not. At no point in the entire process, we've not programmed Maya to reject candidates. We don't want a bot rejecting our candidates at all. The decision of shortlisting depends with the recruiter, and of course, she's enabling the recruiter with all the information that she's collected. So today we have implemented Maya in the UK and in the US. The results of what we've seen in the past 7 months that we've implemented her in our recruitment process. So far, we've had 13,000 candidates who've spoken to Maya over the period of last 7 months. A normal recruiter would take 45 minutes to screen, schedule, and do a phone interview. She does that in 4 minutes. That's the time that we have really narrowed down. On an average, candidate complete the entire process in 4 minutes. So we're talking about a time saving of roughly around 30 minutes per CV. So if I look at the time saving that we generated for our teams in the UK, we're talking about some 45 working days on a 6 months period that our recruiters gained, that they will redeploy on more value-added tasks. What we've also seen with Maya is that she has, I would say, clearly labeled certain candidates as interview eligible, interview not eligible, and 70% of candidates who complete the conversation with Maya have been labeled as interview eligible. So you can imagine the time that is saved by the recruiters in interacting with those candidates who are not interview eligible. That's also an additional time saving. The candidate experience is amazing, because we've had candidates who've left us feedback on Glassdoor saying that, oh, we've never had an application process as simple as this. It feels like talking to a human being. She's answered all the questions that I had even before I decide to go further in the interview process or not. It has really changed the way candidate looks at L'Oreal from a candidate perspective, and have really helped them make their decisions faster. So while Maya is taking care of the hard filters like work location, like salary ranges and things like that, what happens to the soft skills? And this is where the second example comes in place. So we've launched an algorithm which again has been made by with the help of our employees. And every candidate who complete a Maya conversation, they receive an email saying, okay, you have to answer 3 more questions, 3 behavioral, open-ended questions. The first one being, tell us about a project which failed, what did you learn from that project? The second one being, tell us about a project where you're working with multicultural teams, what experiences you had. And the third question is, tell us about a situation where you were convinced of your idea, but your seniors weren't. How did you convince them? So these three candidates answer these three questions. Their answers are compared with the answers given by our employee, and a cultural fit score is established. Now, this information comes in our applicant tracking system, and the recruiters basically arrange the CVs with the culture fit scores that they have. I'm going to show you a small video, and then we continue our conversation further on this particular project.
China produces 7 million job-hungry graduates every year.
How excited would you be to work somewhere like L'Oreal?
It's beyond words.
There's no shortage of enthusiasm, of course, but with such large numbers, how does a company go about choosing the best? Well, the French cosmetics company L'Oreal has been doing what pretty much everyone else is doing, limiting their search to China's top-tier universities.
We want to assess you for the culture, for the style, for the fit of L'Oreal.
It's a problem that recruiters everywhere will be familiar with. There's simply no time to read every CV. And so, despite knowing they could be excluding a lot of potential talent, if the candidate didn't go to a top school, their CV is automatically rejected. At least until now, that is, because this year L'Oreal in China has decided to do away with this mountain of paperwork and replace it with something that every student has, regardless of educational background: the mobile phone. All they need to do is get online and use their mobile phones to answer 3 simple questions. If you're given an assignment but the instructions are unclear, this one reads, how would you go about completing it to a high standard? Their answers are fed into the computer system of this Shanghai-based startup company by analysing the language used.
So, 1,000.
The vocabulary and sentence structure. The software designers claim to be able to make accurate predictions about key personality traits.
If you look at computers, they have no emotions, they have no moods. So you can program it to act like an ideal human that would judge these answers without any sort of color, any sort of bias. And that's what we've done here.
Laurel Sun is one of those who almost certainly wouldn't have made it to the interview stage before, but her high computer score means now she's in with a chance. And so to decision time. This year, of the 70 new recruits, more than 1/3 come from universities that wouldn't previously have been considered.
You think it was a good fit? What we're really looking for in students is raw talent. You want people that are a better fit to your company culture, a better fit to the competencies that you look for. And they're not necessarily going to have those competencies just because they went to this university or worked at this company before.
As for Laurel,
How did you do, Laura?
Hi.
You've got it?
well, she made it through the interview. One life changed by a computing revolution in recruitment. John Sudworth, BBC News, Shanghai.
So we launched this in 2015 in China. At that point in time, when we look at the prediction accuracy of the algorithm, it was, as we speak today rather, it is 83%. So meaning 100 candidates, if they go through the entire process with the algorithm, we have recruited 83% of them just after the first interview / the first assessment center. So we launched this in UK in the English language, in Spain and Argentina in Spanish, in Brazil in Portuguese, and in the US in English. The way this works is our employees are answering questions in the local language. So the models that we are building, the culture models that we are building, are relevant to the country level. So what is L'Oreal's culture in China? What is L'Oreal's culture in India? What is L'Oreal's culture in Brazil? As opposed to having one overarching corporate culture being tested again and again, candidates being compared with again and again. In the UK example that we implemented, 70% of hires that we made in the UK were in the top 30% scorers from the algorithm. 40% plus when it comes to diversity. So we've recruited people from schools which were not premier, non-prestige schools in the UK. 40% of our talent now comes from these schools, thanks to their high computer score, which is nothing but an indication of how they fit with the L'Oreal culture. So in the video, you saw this candidate by the name Laurel Sun. So the interesting part about her is she's a lawyer by her academic background. And today what she does is she heads our e-commerce team for one of our biggest brands, L'Oreal Paris, in China. So a lawyer doing an e-commerce job in China. So if there was a manual process before where a recruiter was doing CV screening or keyword screening, I'm sure she would not have made it because, oh, what will a lawyer do in an e-commerce job? But this is where the whole the value add of a process, of an algorithm which has no biases like we humans sometimes have. The next step for us for both these technologies is we are scaling them globally. So in talent acquisition, we will be implementing these technologies at a global level in languages that our countries, that are spoken in our countries. We don't want to limit ourselves just to talent acquisition. We will be bringing these technologies in the HR domain, where it's all about engaging with employees, like a bot engaging with employees, answering their questions, or employees answering questions and the algorithm saying what kind of jobs the employees can do in the future, how can we grow employees, how can we grow their careers. So that's a plan in the short term that we have globally. Needless to say, there are some questions that I've been asked, and I clearly see I just have 2 minutes more, so I'm going to rush through this section. The question that keeps coming back to me is, are we replacing humans? Are we getting rid of the human touch that is needed as HR professionals? My answer is clearly no. It took us a lot of time to convince internal teams that this is not replacing humans. For that, what we did was we actually broke down the job of a recruiter into several tasks, and then we started asking ourselves which task can be automated, or which task is a low value add, which task is a high, adds higher value. And we started focusing our initiatives on automating the low value added tasks. What is more important when you launch projects like this, and again, this comes from our learning over the last 3 years, is to have project champions or countries who would support your ideas, who would be willing to take the risk of launching these projects in their countries. What we've also seen is, because when we talk about artificial intelligence, there is somewhere an inherent fear that many people have of losing jobs and opportunity. We need to really tackle them in a very sensitive way. When we launched these projects in L'Oreal globally, I remember having conversations not only with the business leaders, but with also our union teams, where we had to convince our unions as to why this is going to help the organization and not the other way around. And last but not the least, AI, the fear that we have of being replaced, I think there is some element in that. However, what I would say is there is lots of merits in implementing these projects within the organizations. We've seen them clearly for the last 3 years. And I wish all of you also start that journey of digitalizing your HR processes. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah.